When you think about the ultimate library, the one place that held pretty much all the knowledge of the ancient world, what comes to mind? For almost everyone, it's the legendary Library of Alexandria. This place wasn't just a building with scrolls. It was the intellectual sun of its time, a shining beacon with this incredible goal, to gather all of human thought under one single roof.
And the story we all grew up with? It's a total tragedy, right? You can almost picture it. A massive, catastrophic fire. Flames just tearing through, devouring scroll after scroll. Centuries of philosophy, science, art, all of it just wiped out in a single terrible night. It's this heartbreaking image of a whole world of ideas just gone forever.
But what if that story, the one we all know, isn't quite right? What if it's wrong? Yeah, let's really dig into this, because that simple tale of one big fire, it's not the full picture. Not even close. The real story is way more complicated. It's slower, and honestly, it's kind of more heartbreaking. We're not just talking about a fire here. We're basically opening up a historical cold case.
So to really get a handle on what was lost, we've got to first understand the place itself. Alexandria? I mean, this wasn't just another city. It was the absolute center, the vibrant, beating heart of the entire Hellenistic world. The umbilicus, the navel of ancient culture.
And it all started with the man himself, Alexander the Great. He literally mapped out the city's grid. And get this, he was so smart about it, he angled the streets just right to catch these cool winds from the Mediterranean. Basically, he built in a natural air conditioner. How cool is that? Anyway, after Alexander died, one of his top generals, Ptolemy, took over Egypt. And he started a dynasty that was dead set on using its incredible wealth to make Alexandria the greatest city on the planet.
And wow, what a city they built. Just try to picture this. You're sailing towards the coast and you see this enormous lighthouse, the Pharos, made of brilliant white marble from 60 kilometers away. Then you get into the city and you're walking down these massive boulevards, more than 30 meters wide. You'd pass by a man-made hill that looked like a pine cone, a sanctuary for the god Pan. It was just this jaw-dropping spectacle of power and genius.
But for all that grandeur, the city's real crown jewel, its true power source, wasn't made of marble or gold. It was made of papyrus. So let's go inside the intellectual core of Alexandria, the museum and its great library.
Okay, so when we hear the word museum today, we immediately think of, dusty artifacts in glass cases. But the Museum in Alexandria? Totally different. This was something revolutionary. It wasn't a place for stuff, it was a community of scholars. It was basically a state-funded research institution. You can think of it as the world's very first think tank, where the smartest people of the time were literally paid by the government just to think, to argue, and to invent.
And the core of this whole operation was a group of about 30 to 50 full-time scholars. I mean, talk about a dream job. They were on the government payroll, they didn't have to pay taxes, and they got free room and board. They even had this great dining hall where they'd all eat together. Their only job, their entire purpose, was to just push the boundaries of what humanity knew.
So you're probably wondering, how did they actually build this legendary library? Well, it took two things, a ton of royal cash and a policy that was, let's just say, aggressive. Sure, the Ptolemies sent people all over the world to buy up scrolls, but here's the wild part. They had a rule for the port. Any ship that docked in Alexandria had to hand over any books on board. Seriously. Scribes would then frantically copy them, the library would keep the original, and they'd hand the copy back to the poor owner. It was an incredibly bold, almost ruthless plan to grab all the world's knowledge and stick it in one place.
And did it work? Oh yeah. The result was staggering. At its absolute peak, the Great Library and its smaller sister library, the Serapeum, held something like 490,000 scrolls. Think about that. This wasn't just a big bookshelf. It was an attempt to build a complete physical archive of the entire human mind.
Okay, so this brings us right back to that story of the big fire. And look, I get it. The image of all that knowledge going up in smoke is incredibly powerful. But the truth is much messier. The library wasn't murdered in a single night. It was more like a death by 1,000 cuts, a slow, painful decline.
So if there wasn't one big fire, who or what is to blame? Well, the thing is, there was no single culprit, no one person you can point a finger at. The end of the library was a long, tragic decline. It was a perfect storm of bad luck, political turmoil, shrinking budgets, and even ideological violence.
Let's walk through the timeline. The first big hit came in 48 BCE. Julius Caesar, in the middle of a civil war, set a fire in the harbor. That fire spread to some warehouses where a ton of scrolls were stored, and poof, they were gone. The library itself survived, but it was a major blow. Then, a little later, after Cleopatra was gone, the new Roman bosses built a rival city nearby called Nicopolis, and that started to slowly drain away Alexandria's money and its importance. But the final brutal nail in the coffin came much later in 391 CE. That's when Christian mobs, with the state's blessing, destroyed the Serapeum, that sister library, as part of a purge against paganism. And with it went the last major chunk of the collection.
And we actually have an eyewitness account of this decay. The geographer Strabo, who was writing around 20 BCE, saw it happening. He wrote that the old, amazing buildings in Alexandria were almost abandoned because all the focus was on the new Roman city. And that right there is the key to this whole story. The library wasn't just burned down. It was starved of funds, it was neglected, and it was simply allowed to fade away.
So, okay, if it wasn't one big, dramatic fire, just how big was the loss really? What is this ghost that still lingers in our collective memory?
Well, let's just bring that number back for a second. Nearly 500,000 scrolls. At its height, that's what we're talking about. For the ancient world, that number is just almost impossible to wrap your head around.
But here's where it gets truly mind-blowing. Let's fast forward over 1,500 years. In the 14th century, one of the biggest, most important libraries in all of Europe, the Sorbonne in Paris, had about 2,000 books. 2,000, compared to nearly 500,000. That incredible gap, that is the true measure of what humanity lost.
And that's why the real tragedy here isn't just about the lost scrolls themselves, all the forgotten plays or histories we'll never read. The deepest tragedy was the slow, painful death of an idea. A really beautiful and, as it turns out, very fragile idea. The idea that all knowledge from everywhere was precious, that it was worth gathering up, studying, and saving for all the people who had come after us.
Which, of course, leaves us with a question for our own time. I mean, we live in an age of just information overload. It's all stored on servers, in the cloud, on websites that could disappear tomorrow. So what is our Alexandria? And more importantly, are we letting it burn? Not in one big dramatic fire, but through all those slow, creeping dangers, through neglects, through budget cuts, through our own ideological battles. Are we letting our knowledge die by 1,000 tiny, unnoticed cuts?